Hi, for today's episode, I spoke with my lovely friend and actress, Beanie Feldstein. You probably know her from her performances in coming-of-age movies like Lady Bird and Booksmart, or if you watch American Crime Story Impeachment, you would also have seen her as me. But as I was prepping for this conversation, I started thinking about how much Beanie and her role in impeachment actually helped in my own reclaiming. And in our conversation, I was really moved to hear how deeply the experience on the show also impacted her. Anyway, I hope you find something in our chat to connect to, and thanks for joining us on Reclaiming. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Audible. Explore over 1 million audiobooks, podcasts, and exclusive Audible originals that'll inspire and motivate you. Visit audible.com/reclaiming to find your next listen. Thank you to our exclusive fashion partner, Reformation. I honestly can't tell you how many of their pieces have become my go-to favorites. Their sweaters have this incredible way of being both polished and comfortable. And in fact, when we recorded my own reclaiming story for the podcast, I was wearing the same Reformation sweater as the producer interviewing me, but thankfully we had the Clara on in different colors. Their clothes work for all moments in my life, whether it's a casual day out or a more formal occasion. I always find myself reaching for my Reformation pieces. Visit Reformation.com to see why they're one of my favorite brands for stylish and sustainable fashion. Hi, Beanie.
This is so weird.
I know, but exciting.
All week I was like, this is so weird. It's going to be so weird.
Beanie Feldstein.
Yes.
Welcome to Reclaiming.
Thank you.
That's probably the only time I'm going to call you Beanie. The rest is going to be Bean
Okay,
because
good.
that's how I know you.
Good.
I was thinking about how the first time that I saw you on screen was in Lady Bird, and you were so incredibly charming.
Thank you.
And then the next time was when I saw Booksmart. And
That was the one where you told me that you really saw something, right?
It was like that was where I saw the thing. And the thing is that energy that you bring and youth that you have and how you play youth, and that it felt really familiar to me. And it was sort of that sense of being headstrong but also vulnerable, being young but you also think you're such an adult.
Totally.
You know, being a caretaker but you also desperately want to be seen and taken care
Yeah.
of. And it was when I was leaving Booksmart and walking along the Hudson with my friend, and I said that there was something about you in this movie that reminded me of my time in DC, and which I think it probably says how immature maybe in some ways I was because you were playing a high schooler and
But
I
I
had
was
just graduated
24.
college. Okay. But what was amazing is 3 weeks later, I heard from Ryan Murphy. And he wanted, was asking me about coming on as a producer for American Crime Story Impeachment. And one of the first things he said was, I want Beanie Feldstein to play you. And so it just felt like kismet.
First of all, it's so weird to be here because my instinct is to ask you 9,000 questions and completely deflect any question that has to do with myself. So I know that's not the point of being here and I'm going to work on it. But you just can't turn off that curiosity. I love you as a person, but also I played you and I thought about you for so many years of my life that my curiosity about who you are on a deeper level is will never go away. And so on my walk over here today, I was like, I have to not deflect every question that she asks.
You can do whatever you want.
But
so
it's surreal. And I think I had a similar thing, which is that I was asked it was a book signing for my friend's book that I wrote one essay in called Feminists Don't Wear Pink and Other Lies.
Oh, Scarlett's
book.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was asked at a book signing for her book, if you could play anyone real, who would you want to play? And I said, you. And then I was in the park in London with my now wife, then girlfriend's friends. And someone asked me the same question. And I said, you. And that night, Ryan called me.
Oh my gosh.
Literally, I was in Hampstead Heath. We went back to her apartment, my wife's apartment, and I got a text that was like, this is Ryan Murphy, can you call me? And I was like, yes, sir. And he was like, yeah, I want you to play Monica Lewinsky. And I was like, what the Am I allowed to curse?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah, you curse a
Oh,
lot.
are
Okay,
you
yeah.
kidding? This is my fucking podcast. I will fucking swear.
Fuck, yeah. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I
Yeah.
literally couldn't believe my ears. And so it's weird that both of us had sort of a witchy or
Yeah.
kind of...
Well, it's not weird.
Yeah.
It's weird, but not
It's
weird.
beshared. It's
Yes.
beshared. Which means meant to be in Yiddish for those that don't know. But I think like there's always been that gravitational pull in which is very strange and unique and beautiful. But yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's funny because I was thinking about how people probably ask you a lot, like, oh, what's your favorite role that you ever played? And I'm not going to ask that because we know the obvious
answer.
Obviously. It's so funny, but
definitely the hardest role I've ever played.
Okay,
You're
why?
hard to play. Oh God.
Oh.
So many
Like,
reasons. Well, okay. I had played someone real, but a fictionalized version of them. So Caitlin Moran, who you've met now
Yes.
at my wedding,
Yes.
which is crazy to have both of you there. I was like, this is like sliding doors, like a crazy mind meld, but
she's an incredible feminist writer.
incredible. And she wrote a novel that is really close to her life, and I played the lead character in the movie version of her novel, How to Build a Girl. And so that was like really a great learning curve, I think, for playing you, because all the nerves and the pressure, and I take things very seriously, which I think is something that we both do. So it was not shocking that I'm like that too, but I think like I took the responsibility of playing Caitlin so seriously, and the character's name was not Caitlin. It was a loose version of her life, but I took it very intensely, and I did all this research, and then getting the opportunity to play you felt like I had a toolbox, but the needs for the tools got so much bigger. It was like, I thought I had my toolbox. I was like, I have my hammer and my screwdriver. And then it was like, you need power tools and like an expert contractor to come build this house. And I was like, whoa.
There's so many different ways we could interpret that. So,
Yeah, sorry.
but yeah.
I'm not even thinking that way. But I think like, you know, what you had to go through, we can go there or not go there, up to you. But like what you had to go through, I had to go through in my own way to bring your story to life. And fuck, you went through a lot. And we were filming it during the depths of the pandemic. So I was seeing nobody. I was living alone. My now wife was stuck in the UK. So
I
we didn't
remember that.
We didn't see each other for a year. I couldn't see my parents because they were like older, and I didn't want to get them sick, God forbid. And so I was like living alone with you in my head.
I am so fucking sorry, Beanie.
It was such a gift, but like, and then also just like as an actor, it was the first time that I had been given, which is also weird to say to you because it's your life, but like what is like pretty distinctly a drama. Like I had done a lot of comedy or dramedy up until then, and this was the first time that I was like, this is a pure and straight drama, and I've never been tasked with that before. And then you layer on the distinct privilege of it being someone that I love and that I care about, and I took your reclamation very seriously, and I know you know that.
You're a part of my reclaiming story.
Makes me want to cry, but I think like that it weighed very heavily on me, as it should have, because it was a tall for a very short stout person. It was a very tall task. It was the role that I think pushed me the most, was the hardest on me, and the most gratifying, because I could see and feel the actual effect that it had, even just as like a hologram of you or whatever, an extension of you.
Yeah.
Because the conversations that people would have with me about you changed. And that was really magical and justified and heartwarming, and it makes me very emotional. I haven't thought about it, and it feels like a long time ago now. I don't know how it feels for you.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a long time ago, and I just, you brought so much depth and warmth to the character, but also so much emotional truth.
Yeah.
I mean, what surprised you about the story? In part because you were only 5, right? So you were only 4 when,
4 or 5,
when it happened. But so what surprised you in terms of...
Like in my research?
Yeah, just in terms of the story or something you learned about me or...
Oh my God, how much time do we have? I think...
Yeah.
So much. Well, emotionally, the most surprising thing I think was, which is not exactly the question you asked, but
It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong here.
Was like, I knew I could not play you without listening to the tapes, but listening to the tapes was torturous for me as someone that loves you and was going to play you and was going to play you listening to the tapes. It was unbelievably hard to, I mean, not compared to what your experience was, but it's, like it was, it felt wrong. It felt wrong to sit there and listen, but also it was my job to be as fully informed as to what you were thinking and feeling in those moments. And so it would have been ludicrous to not do that. That would have been like bad acting.
Right, like malpractice.
Yeah, exactly. Literally a heresy. But like, I think I was shocked at how like sick I felt doing it.
Yeah.
Because I was always trying to protect you. And so that was really interesting. But I think, and I really believe that Ryan's episode, the 6th episode of the show, I think we can always do better, and I'm always pushing myself to be better, but I really think hopefully you feel that we did it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But that no one knew about.
Right. So we're talking about it was the 6th episode that was the bulk of the episode was the FBI sting.
Yes.
So January 16th, which you very sweetly reach out to me every January 16th because I call it my Survivor's Day. Yeah. It's so sweet. And
it's just, but it's a part of me too now, you know? And so I always think about you on that day very deeply. It took us like, I think 25 days to film that episode, which like, if you understand TV, you normally get 9. That was crazy. Like,
no, it was so, but so because it was that episode chronicled the 13 hours that I spent from kind of being quote unquote apprehended in a shopping mall by the FBI, Pentagon City Mall with my good friend Linda Tripp, and then taken to a hotel room in the Ritz-Carlton.
Which is attached to the mall.
Exactly, which is very bizarre.
So bizarre.
So bizarre.
Like, truth is always stranger than fiction.
Right.
And that entire episode, but like the research I did leading up to it, I truly don't think one person in my life knew.
Yeah, no.
That was 100% the most shocking part. Yeah. I think even now, I was listening to your first episode and your episode with Olivia Munn, and I think like even just the amount of legal, I don't know what the right word would be, the amount of
legal bullshit.
But the fact that you were threatened to be imprisoned.
Right. Yeah.
I think is like beyond
27 years.
Shocking.
Yeah. No.
And that was another moment of like clutching my pearls during my research because I was 4.5 when this all happened. I always had an understanding of, the general beats of the story. But I was so young that I don't even think I took the time before I was going to play you to like zoom out and situate it within history. Like it was just kind of one paragraph in a history story, And I never judged you, but I also never took the time to like interrogate what happened to you. That's my truth before I played you.
No.
But the reason I wanted to play you is because I also felt that like warmth and very genuine spirit that you have in the little that I knew about you. And also I was like, she's a West LA Jew. She did musical theater. I was like, honey, we're the same. Yeah. But I think like the level of fear that they instilled and that they wielded, I had no idea. Yeah. And the fact that you were literally a part of a sting and held for 13 hours and that your mom had to come from New York and they wouldn't let you talk to your lawyer and you going into the department store and like all of that was utterly shocking to me as someone who was a toddler when this all happened. I had no idea.
I think what's so interesting too, and I'm sure as a sociology major, you
thanks, Monica, you remember.
Exactly. That you probably, thought about it this way too, if it's interesting to me of your sort of affirmation about people not knowing about that. And yet it was not all the details of it, but the fact that the sting happened was made public pretty early in the investigation. And so it was always, as a psych major, it was really interesting for me to think about how people were judging me for all of these other things. And yet, if there is anything that speaks more to my character, even some of the worst things that I've done that speak to my character, that would be it. Would be, refusing to wear a wire and make monitored calls at 24 years old. Yeah. So that was always interesting to me.
Yeah.
And
it's unbelievable. When I got cast, there was a lot of people that were like, you're too young to play Monica Lewinsky. And I was like, I'm older than she ever was in this whole story.
Yeah.
And people, I think, also age you up in their heads, which is also incredibly frustrating.
Well, I think that I wonder in some ways, actually, I've never thought about that. I wonder if that's a way of people feeling better about their judgment.
Totally. I mean, that's my assessment for sure.
But it's interesting because I think one of the things that was so fascinating to me about, first of all, let's just acknowledge, it is so weird to have somebody play you.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing.
And I think, if we're really honest, it's still weird. I don't think it will ever, I think we have a very unique bond.
Yes.
I think, I almost need us as cousins or something now.
100%.
But it's also...
Yeah, we could be from the same shtetl.
Totally. We probably are. If we did that show where it's chase each other back. I felt a little nervous to come talk to you because I was like, no, in a good way. It's just, I care. That care is never going to go away. And so I'm so proud of what you're doing with the podcast. And I'm just always going to be your champion.
Ditto.
But I think, thank you. But I think also it's good to acknowledge that it will always be weird.
Yeah.
It is just, it's very weird.
I think what is interesting about watching your life, we have our memory, right? And so how we relive things in our memory, but it's always through our point of view.
Totally.
And so to kind of observe certain things, I really felt like one of the aspects that I came to metabolize about my own story from watching it was the age difference. And I think because of your youth and because being reminded of that, and especially since it came out just a couple years after Me Too and, just reevaluating things, it was just so fascinating for me to see that. And then incredible scenes with you and Sarah Paulson, who played Linda Tripp, where I think it was really the one where Linda's wearing the wire in the restaurant and everything happened at that fucking Ritz-Carlton. Sorry, Ritz-Carlton, but everything happened at that Ritz-Carlton. But so that lunch where Linda was wearing the wire and I obviously didn't know.
Yeah.
And
but you had the instinct to look through her purse.
I did because I had stopped trusting her probably a few weeks earlier than that. But in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined
the depths of the deceit.
Exactly. What was in that scene that was interesting was to observe other people in the background even. Have you ever heard about people talking about kind of almost coming out of themselves and witnessing?
Like an out-of-body, bird's eye view. Yeah.
So it was very much like that.
Yeah.
And because my experience of that day was so myopic.
Of course.
Of just, Linda, the waiter or waitress, don't even remember. But to sort of see all these other people who were in fact FBI agents in the restaurant, it just recontextualized it in such a different way for me. And
well, I think that's what I mean when I acknowledge that it's very strange, because in some ways I am a representation of a trigger for you. I think I know that it must have been impossibly hard to watch the show, and you had to watch me. And so I will always kind of embody that feeling in some way. But also, we're friends and you were at my wedding and we love each other so deeply. But both can be true, I think.
Yeah,
I just imagine it would be unbelievably hard to watch someone play out the lowest moments of your life.
It is. It was really
and
hard.
your parents, and
I
you know,
know.
there's
Oh,
so
by the way, I'm supposed to give you 2 kisses.
Oh, I love
one
your
for
mom
you, exactly.
so
one
much.
for you and one for
Vaughn,
Bonnie.
of course.
I know.
Your mom is like I love her so much.
Me too.
She's a little angel.
She is.
Oh my God.
I know, but
really,
she was
the person
so
I should play
excited.
was her because she's so small.
Like she is so small. I know. She's so small. It's
everyone was like,
Marsha.
that Beanie doesn't look like Monica. She's so much shorter. I was like, I can't stretch my legs. I don't know what to tell you. They had me in the heels. You know, we did the whole thing, but
it was
walking on
good.
apple boxes all the time.
Gosh. Oh my gosh.
So
but it was
funny.
But I think the thing that was the most, and Ryan does this so well in his shows, the thing that's so important was the emotional truth.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that you did in dramatizing this was, I think, allowing people to observe what happened without it being attached to however they actually felt about me. So it allowed people to find their own story in my story in ways. And I think because, I mean, I talk about it this way, a lot of it being a collective story, that it's sort of, you know, owned by all of us.
It is, yeah.
I think that's so important for understanding, you know, in that way.
That was a big part of why I didn't wear contacts too, because your eyes are lighter than mine, like more blue green, and mine are like brown green. And I was like, this is like how I act. Like this is how my truth comes across. And I think if we had blocked that with a lens, like there would have been something lost in bringing you to life. That's my tool, I think, like my biggest tool in telling your story. And I think not just tears, but just all of the complexities behind what you were
it's so
going
true.
through.
I know. It's but it's interesting because I mean, so many different things on the ride here of just
I know, me too.
I know, but
Spinning.
it was exactly. And it was funny because I remembered this, like this story came up for me of it must have been 15, 20 years ago, because it was pre-iPhone, but I was going to pick up my friend John in Nantucket, and I was summering. I've only summered once, but that was it.
Fun.
I was summering.
I've never been.
Yeah, I was like, I live in New York now. I need to summer. That's what people do. I went to go pick up John, who had been out fishing with his friend and his friend's dad. And I pull up to the gate, and there's a mailbox and the little, you know, buttony intercom thing. And I look at the mailbox and like something about the last name, whatever, go inside, ring the doorbell, and John's friend's father opens the door and introduces himself. And then I realize that it was familiar to me because he had been one of the private investigators that the Clintons had hired at the time, and so, or had been rumored to work for them, as documented in newspapers. And so that was pretty jarring. But, you know, me, and I know you're this way too, it was like quickly pivot to humor in my head.
Disarm. That's how you like.
I know. So in my head, I was like, oh man, my therapist would kill for his file on me. Of just this feeling of like, this person may know more about me or aspects of me than I see or know about myself. And so I was just so curious if there were things that you felt you learned about me that you didn't think I knew about myself.
Whoa.
That's a really hard question.
Whoa,
so
that's like so deep. Well, the thing I think, I just feel like I approach everything about you with compassion, because I would want someone to do that for me.
Thanks, Bean.
But no thanks needed. But I think, like, to go back to the tape so briefly, I know it's so upsetting, but like, if I would give anyone the benefit of the doubt, like if someone recorded me and my mom, person I love and trust more than anyone other than my wife, like, or me and my wife, like, you'd say things in passing when you're chopping a cucumber. That's just a visual I have of me chopping my cucumber as you, but like, you know, when you're making dinner or you're getting out of the shower or you're just living your fucking life, that out of context would sound so insane or not, or so X, Y, or Z, whatever word you want to put in. So, but it's like, this was you talking to someone that you loved. And I think the thing that maybe I knew about you already, and I know you know about yourself, is that especially in that moment, your heart was wide open. And I think you know that. I do think you know that. But to play it out every day, like...
I never would have thought of it that way. So you're
okay,
right.
Okay, good.
You're
so
right.
It's good.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think I would have... I don't think I would have thought about it that way.
Okay, good. I got to a good answer. I think.
Yeah, you got a prize.
Thank you.
No. But it's interesting with the tapes too, because I was curious about, you and Sarah Paulson became super close.
Which is so unbelievably weird, right?
Right.
Because we were playing the most fucked up friendship story
ever
of all
and
time.
So what I didn't know was, did you guys do that on purpose to feel the closeness? Did the idea of Sarah ever potentially betraying you in that way?
Oh, no.
How did that work?
Yeah.
How's that?
Well, first of all, Paulson was like on my top 3 of people that I was desperate to work with. Like, there were other projects that came up that I, when I would see her name on an email, I'd be like, can I please audition? She was always in my... After watching her as Marsha Clark, I was like, this is one of the greatest we have, and I have to learn from her. And in order to do that, I have to work with her, right? And so when Ryan called me, he was like, Sarah's playing Linda Tripp, and I literally fell to the floor. I was like, this is my, like, Juilliard. This is my Yale School. This is like when I get to learn in a way that I've never been able to learn, in addition to bringing something very important to life, playing you. It really was so just intrinsic. She actually emailed me after Lady Bird came out, and she wrote me an email that I still have saved on my emails about my performance, and like that literally changed my life. Like that email, like her reaching out as such a seasoned actor and seeing me, and I was so young and I was so green when I filmed that movie, that like to reach out to me, she didn't have to do that. Like, it was so touching. And so I knew that she was an open-hearted person.
Yeah, she's a very special person.
She's the speciest. But I think I can only speak for myself. I really don't think either of us were like, we have to be best friends. It just fell into place. And also, we were filming during COVID,
right,
where we only really had each other to see because everything was so locked down. And also, if there's one thing you know about Sarah, is that she cares. I thought I cared 100%. She cares 150% about her work and takes it so seriously. And so we were just in constant communication about how we wanted to play things. And we were also both producers in addition to you on the project. So we were just in constant communication, and it just really fell into place. But then it was so weird. Like we had that weird screening of I only say weird because, again, it was COVID. We couldn't bring anyone.
Right.
Of the finale. That was like the night I asked her to be my bridesmaid in my wedding. And it's just like so wild that like after screening, the end of a tragic, devastating, horrible friendship story, that was what came out of it, And I think like, I don't think either of us pushed it. It just really fell into place.
There were so many aspects of this project and process that were new to me, but also things that I felt like origami, that I had to kind of open and unpack and think about from different perspectives in a way. And that was even sitting down to have dinner with her, to try to answer some questions for her about Linda. And it's just... It was such a strange...
Surreal.
It was very...
I can't
surreal
imagine.
is the perfect word. But can we talk about... Do you talk about your wedding at all?
Sure,
Okay,
yeah.
can we
Oh my
talk
God,
about your
of
wedding
course.
just a little?
Of course.
Because it was such a magical... It was so magical.
I was so touched that you came.
Oh my gosh, of
so
course.
Special to have you there.
Oh, I loved being there. It was such a special moment too I remember, first of all, it was this gorgeous... It was at a camp.
Yes.
And it was this gorgeous physical environment of being out in the trees. So it was forest and water.
Yes.
And
it's called Cedar Lakes Estate. And it's a venue that used to be an actual working summer camp. Then it was an Olympic training camp. And then this Italian family bought it. And when 2 of the sisters grew up, one of them was a chef and one of them was in like events and interiors. And they were like, this is something really special. Let us take it over. And now it's like the most beautiful place to get married or have a special event.
It was so interesting because it started to rain right before.
Don't I know it?
Yes, exactly. But it was we're sitting outside in this incredible
view, and it's misty, and it's just everything was so filled with love. And then you were dressed by Gucci that was even more fabulous and had lots of outfits.
Yes.
Lots of outfits.
It was
How many outfits did you have for the wedding total? Because it was a couple days.
Yes, it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Friday, Bon wore Bodhi suit and I wore a Rodarte dress. And then Saturday, they made us both Gucci made us both outfits, which is just surreal. It's also the first time I think they've ever dressed both people in the couple. They do a lot of grooms, but they don't do a lot of brides. And certainly, like, I don't know if they've ever done a bride wearing a suit, but I think it was one of their first times doing that. And they were, I cannot say how unbelievably generous they were. Like, they made Bon 6 bow ties so that she could pick the one she wanted on the day. And for me, I know you're very woo-woo, so I'm going to tell this story.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Because I am too. I'm very, again, open-hearted, open soul, whatever you want to say. But for my dress, they sent 5 sketches.
Oh my goodness.
And they were like, pick the one that you want. And I had narrowed it down to 2. And Bon, just for reference, my wife is so many things, but she's not super woo-woo. She's like very grounded and practical. She's a Capricorn. She's like, you know, if I can't see it, I don't know if it's there, you know? And I didn't show her the dresses because I wanted to keep it a surprise for the day. And I was like, I think I know which one I'm going to go for, but I'm deciding between 2. And we went to sleep and we wake up and Bon was like, oh my God, I had a dream about your grandma last night. And my grandma passed away during COVID, right before we started filming. And we called her Nan. And she was like, Nan was in my dream. And I was like, what? And she never has dreams like this. And we both have had a lot of loss in our life. And she was like, this is the first time I've ever had like a dream like this. My grandma had rheumatoid arthritis, so her hands were really bad at the end.
My Oma did too.
Really?
Sorry, go ahead.
Ashkenazi Jew.
Yeah.
And her hands were really, really bad at the end for years at the end, and she couldn't really move them. Very painful. And she was like, she was pouring me tea, and I was like, man, your hands. And she was like, I feel no pain here. So crazy. And then she was like, tell Beanie she has to pick the one with the bow. One bow, not the other one. And Bon was like, what? And she was like, just tell her.
Oh, are you serious?
And Bon literally, like, I wish she was here because she would confirm, like, she does not, this is not a common occurrence. She doesn't really, she's not necessarily open to things like this. But this was like clear as day. And I think it's like starting to turn her, which is great. But she was just like, I have to pass along the message that you should pick this one. And I was like, that's the one I was going to pick. So that's the dress I ended up wearing, which I feel that my grandma, my Nan, had a part in picking. And it was so beautiful. I've never felt more beautiful than in that dress. But the whole wedding, our goal was like for it to be really casual and cozy and not stuffy or too fancy or just anything that felt detached from us.
It was. All of it was great. It was very elegant and cozy.
My dream.
You know, really perfect.
My dream. Thank you so much.
So you mentioned having a lot of loss.
Yes.
And you're very close to your family. So for people who may not know, tell me about just your upbringing, your family, because your family is, like me, the most important.
Yes. Very, very, very close. So like you, I grew up in West LA. My parents are both from New York originally, and my whole extended family is from New York. So I immediately left LA and went to Wesleyan, where I studied sociology, and then I moved right to New York. I always knew that I wanted to be on the East Coast. I've always felt very much like an East Coast person that grew up in LA. And, you know, my mom has like a thick Long Island accent, even though she's lived in LA for like 50 years. Yeah, we're just New Yorkers. We're real. That's our energy. I grew up loving performing. I always knew that I wanted to be an actor, but I also went to a really beautifully academic high school called Harvard Westlake. The best thing that came out of it is that all of my best friends to this day, now that I'm in my 30s, are still from high school. And, you know, we're just kind of like this troupe of artists, but more than that, we're still inseparably close. And that is the greatest gift the school gave me, but it also gave me a real love for my academic self. And so when I went to Wesleyan, I loved it because there was so much access to the arts, but it was also quite rigorous. And I studied sociology because I really wanted to broaden my perspective and pop the bubble of, some of the very narrow mindset that I was brought up in, not necessarily in my family, but just like the privileged, private school thing. I just wanted to expand my mind. And I also think, even though I always knew I wanted to be an actor, I feel personally that the phrase that's like, don't do it unless it's the only thing you can do, I hate that phrase.
Interesting.
It's very common with actors, like, don't pursue it unless it's the only thing that you can do or want to do.
Okay. I don't think I've heard that, maybe because I don't want to be an actor. I mean, I did want to do musical theater for 5 minutes, but
it's so common, and I hate it because I think it leads to very narrow-minded actors, and I could do and would love to do several other things, and I do some of them outside of acting.
What? I don't actually know this.
Well, one of them, which we could probably get to, which is what I was thinking about as my reclaiming, is that I am on the board of and I volunteer for a grief organization, which we can get to. But
yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think to just finish the loop on school, I think I really knew I wanted to be an actor, but I knew that putting blinders on and only studying theater for the rest of my life was not going to make me the person I wanted to be, let alone the actor I wanted to be. And I think it's different for everyone. But for me, expanding my mind and expanding my perspective and seeing the world more clearly just helps me in my storytelling. But more importantly, like, I think makes me a better person that's more connected to the world, which is more important than being a good actor for me. But so that was sort of like the quickest way I could describe myself up until this moment.
It's interesting you say that, because I remember when I came out of graduate school and I wanted to do sort of, they called it pro-social marketing or something like that. And one of the things I was looking at was in advertising, because I was interested in how a strong creative can change social behavior. And I talked to someone at an ad agency, and he was saying that he only hired people who didn't study advertising because he wanted different perspectives brought in. And so I think that's some of what you're saying too, is that you're bringing layered life experience to your craft in that way. So,
and, when in a role like you,
in a role like
playing you, the study of sociology at Wesleyan for 4 years really came in handy because there was a lot to explore and unpack, and on a societal level, not just on a personal level.
Right.
So when we were talking about the show, when we were putting it out, I would often say, which is hard to say to your face, but I felt like you were a meal for society to feast upon. That was often how I would describe it, because I felt like they were just like picking up pieces of you, and it's such a toxic part of what our society can do. And so much of what I know you do in your advocacy and your activism.
Yeah, but also it's interesting because I'm now exec producing this limited series on Amanda Knox.
Yes,
and Amanda's an EP on the project. And I think a lot of what drew me to it was that same thing of a young woman being feasted on by the world. I mean, and I say that all the time. I think I stole it from the showrunner, but it's interesting. And so I think that's those kinds of stories. It's so important for society to see reflected to us what we do.
I think it can happen in an unbelievably public stage, like it did for you or for her. But it can also happen like in your classroom in your workplace. Like, it doesn't always have to be something that's happening so publicly and on such a world internet stage. Like, it's also a feeling that I think several people feel when they are made to, be the punching bag in a situation or something like that. And I think I felt it throughout my life in moments. I think everybody has, which is another reason I think exploring that side of what happened to you was, as you said, very touching and almost universal, even though it's such a specific thing, because we've all felt that we have been like the punching bag or the example or publicly shamed.
I mean, I'll often say to people, because they'll start to tell their public shaming story or whatever, and they'll say, well, but it's nothing like what you went through, and and I always say the same thing, which is that if I drown in 60 feet of water and you drown in 30, we both drowned.
Totally.
Like, there's no sort of winning at
No.
public humiliation.
No one wants to win.
No one wants to win.
Thanks so much to Audible, our presenting sponsor. Let Audible expand your life by listening. Look, we're all trying to better ourselves, right? And sometimes finding the time to sit down and read can feel impossible. With Audible, you'll have access to over 1 million audiobooks and podcasts right at your fingertips. Whether you're going for a walk or just making dinner, and by making dinner, I also mean ordering delivery, you can tap into all this amazing content from thought leaders to experts who really get it. And let me tell you something, whatever you're interested in, it's there. If you're into health and wellness, they've got you covered. Trying to get into meditation, there's stuff for that too. Looking for a good laugh? Oh my gosh, so much good content. And being able to listen while you're doing other things makes it so much more doable. Let Audible help you reach the goals you've set for yourself. Start listening today when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/reclaiming. Thanks so much to our sponsor, Reformation. I want to take a second to talk about one of my favorite clothing brands, Reformation. You've probably seen Reformation on Instagram or at a wedding. They make the best guesting dresses. But if you're like me, you may have thought that's all they do. Well, you're in for a pleasant surprise. Last year, they worked with yours truly and Vote.org on a campaign to empower voters to take part in the democratic process and show off their workwear. From doing the campaign and getting to know the brand even better, I love their sweaters, blouses, workwear, shoes, and bags. But most important, I love how confident I feel in their stuff. Plus, it really holds up since they make everything with super high-quality, sustainable materials. Reformation is also a brand that uses their growing platform to do good in the world, and especially in the sustainable fashion space. As they say, being naked is the #1 most sustainable option. Reformation is #2. If you're looking for clothes you want to feel great in and feel better about, head to reformation.com.
Your family is so important to you. And I don't know if there's one person who's listening to this who doesn't know that your brother Jonah Hill is Jonah Hill.
That's correct.
So also an actor. So
Yeah.
I'm also curious if there was competition there growing up, whatever.
None.
None? Okay. But you're a very sort of entertainment
Adjacent.
family,
Yeah.
right? Because your mom was a costume designer and your dad was an accountant
Yes.
for a rock band. For what?
My
or a
dad
band.
is an accountant.
Okay.
But he does work with like musicians and actors.
Okay, right.
But it's so funny because people will be like, the internet makes it sound like my dad is like in, the recording studio with people. And I'm like, my dad files taxes. Like
Right.
my dad is an accountant who wears his pants up to his nose. Like this is not like the glamour.
He's so sweet.
He's the nicest man.
Yes,
he's
such a sweetie.
such an angel. But he is an accountant. That is what he does. And my mom went to FIT, started in costume design. She worked on Taxi and a few sitcoms in that era. And then pivoted to kind of personal styling, which really wasn't an engine like it is today. I mean, now, stylists are so famous and it's such a world of like, who styles this actor or this singer? But my mom is very good with trends and she's very ahead of her time. And so she was kind of doing that like the late 80s, early 90s when that wasn't really a thing. And then she invented the sparkle watch. Did you know this about her?
No. No, I did not.
So she was like the first person to put a Swarovski crystal on anything.
Oh.
This is an iconic part of Shay's
my
story.
gosh.
Yeah. This is like 1999 into 2000.
Wow.
And her company made the Carrie Bradshaw cell phone.
Oh my
But then people
gosh.
very quickly realized they could make it for like way less. And she had no stake in the game. She just like knew it would be a trend. And so
my
she
gosh.
didn't, she kind of let that go. Once people started copying her, she was like, I don't care
Right.
enough to like keep at the fight of,
Yeah.
a business. And all along, she has always been very, very committed to philanthropy. And she was on the board of several charities when I was growing up. And I think if there's one thing that all 5 Feldsteins share, so my mom, my dad, my oldest brother, Jordan, who died, and then Jonah, and then me, is insane work ethic. We all work fiercely. And a lot of generosity. That was like really instilled in us from our parents. Like you have to give back and you have to find the thing that really propels you in giving back. And my whole adult life, I always was kind of searching for that thing that would really capture my heart and make me want to, dive in. And so my brother Jordan died when I was 24, and it was extremely sudden and horrible, and that obviously shook my whole world, my whole family's world.
Beanie.
Thank you. And 2 years ago, I was on TikTok, which I don't have anymore, but I was on then. And, videos are just given to you on TikTok. You don't look for them. And this video popped up of a little boy, and he was talking about how his father had died of a heart attack. He was maybe 9 or 10. And that camp made him feel so much more comfortable talking about it, and that all of his friends at camp understood. And I was like, what am I watching right now?
Yeah.
Like, I also went to camp for 10 years, like
Yeah,
summer
I
camp.
was going to say, your wedding, there was a whole, your camp friend table, right?
Exactly. And my
Yeah.
parents met at summer camp as
Right.
teenagers. So
Right.
camp is a huge part, maybe hard work, generosity camp is like a huge part of the Feldstein way. And so I was like, camp and grief and children, like, what am I watching right now? And it was from an account called Experience Camps. And I immediately did like the deepest dive,
Yeah,
And I watched this short documentary they have on their website. I did like a deep, thorough dive of the website. And basically, the organization is a nonprofit that sends children that have experienced the death of a parent or a sibling or a primary caregiver to camp for 1 week, completely no cost. And every child there has experienced that as well. And so not only are you getting people out of their kids, not people, out of their environment and putting on an amazing 1 week, activity for them, but they are surrounded by people that get that and understand that. And it's, Monica, it makes me want to cry. Like, it is the most special week of my year. The way that we are able to exist in joy and grief at the same time is something that I wish all of our society could feel and could get to when it comes to grief. And I think a big part of experience camps is changing the narrative around loss and grief for these kids so that they can grow up in a society that's better than the one we currently have when it comes to talking about death.
Is there sort of almost a your own language of sort of a grief language that people that you see maybe with the kids or with the adults there, of that there's just a way of talking or talking about something?
It's a great question. So yeah, I skipped this part, which is that I reached out to the organization and they were like, you should come volunteer. And so I go once a year for a week. I live in the bunk with the kids. I'm like everything a camp counselor.
Those kids are so lucky.
I'm
my gosh.
I'm the lucky one. But it's a full-on like true summer camp experience. My girls were in 6th grade and 7th grade the past 2 summers that I've done it.
Oh my gosh.
And 11 and 12-year-old girls. And to answer your question, the biggest thing, I was actually just talking to our clinical director this morning. The biggest thing that she instills in us as volunteers, and hopefully in order to trickle down to the kids, is using clear and specific language. So specifically for kids, and I'm not a clinician, I'm not a therapist, but this is what I've learned. Kids developmentally, depending on how old they are, they don't understand euphemism. They don't understand abstract thoughts. Everything is quite concrete.
Okay.
And so when you say things like crossed over or no longer with us, that doesn't mean anything to them. That's quite confusing.
Wow.
And so they really instill in us to say died, to say death, to say words and use language that is very clear.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, they bristle, right?
Especially
Even as an
Jew,
adult,
or as a Jew.
Yeah,
like it's very...
It's so not the way. And it's even hard for me. And even I practice it in this conversation of like when my brother died. And it's very hard to say. But the kids have taught me, it's such a, through learning how to care for them, that language is actually quite helpful. because they don't
So interesting.
they don't like or understand, or a mixture of both, and neither do we really as an adult, like in a better place. One of my campers said, if my dad was in a better place, he'd be sitting right next to me right now. What are you talking about?
Right.
And they are angry
Yeah.
because that language is so frustrating. He's
So
not
I
in a
never
better
would
place.
have thought of this. I never would have thought of
If
this.
he was in a
It's
better
so
place, he would be sitting
interesting.
next to me right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Right.
be at grief camp, you know? And I think, like, instead, it's that your dad died and he's not here and he's not going to come back. It's fucking brutal to say, but it helps it sink in, and it helps them. And those phrases, I think for adults as well would probably agree, they're very frustrating, and it's really more to make the other person feel more comfortable than it
Yeah.
is the person who is experiencing the loss.
Did going to camp help you with another layer of grief about Jordy?
Definitely. I mean, I obviously our slogan at experience camps is FTK, for the kids. So like everything is always for the kids, but it would be foolish to say that we don't get so much out of it. And we do try to support the volunteers because most of us have lost someone. And so we'll do, like, once the kids go to bed, one counselor will stay with them and the others can go to like their own staff grief circle and have their own time to process. But the magic of seeing like 150 girls scream Taylor Swift at the top of their lungs and dance in the dining hall, you would never know that you were looking at a grief camp. And then an hour later, they're in grief circle and they're talking about their people. They're showing us photos or sweaters or stuffies or whatever they brought from their person. And we're getting into the real heart of it with them. And both can exist in the same space. And that is like the magic of camp. The fact that joy and grief, you know, it's almost like an inside out. Like, you know, how sadness and joy, they exist their best together. Like that is the heart of what we live at experience camps, which is like showing these kids that their grief is so real and they do not have to hide it, and that adults will listen and their peers will listen and they understand. But also it's okay to go in the lake and jump off the board and scream and have fun and, you know, make friendship bracelets and play volleyball in the same day.
Right. But I think one of the things that comes up for me is this idea that it's creating new societal norms around grief, which is, so I think you were saying this about helping this younger generation grow up in a different way with it. You know, I think one of the things I have, I don't know, developed in the last decade or so is really coming to understand the many, you know, faces of grief, right? And so the many ways that we grieve. And in fact, like when I think when I was pitching the Reclaiming podcast, it was this idea of you have so many stages in a reclaiming, and one of them is loss because you have something that was lost or taken from you, you know, and grief always comes, even if it's just a moment. And I feel as if we don't, you know, we don't really talk about it. We don't talk about it because, in part because none of us, I don't know, for me, I think it feels like I'd be tickling some, you know, bad God that would, if you start talking about it in a way that you're going to bring it into your life.
It's like a superstitious thing?
Right.
Interesting, yeah.
Superstitious. And so
I do find, forgive me for interrupting you,
No.
I do find that if I could give people one, and look, I'm just one griever. I don't represent every person that's grieving. But if there was one thing I could wish for people, it's that, you know, I think often when we find out someone has died, the first question is how. And I think that how did they die, especially asking that to the person that has experienced loss. It's really a reflection of their own fear. They want to know what to look out for. They want to, at least for those of us that experience anxiety, they want, me too. Like we want to add another thing to our list of things that could happen to us, or to be fearful of.
Right.
And my wish for people listening is, instead of letting the fear ask the question, which I've done it before. I understand. Like, I have compassion. Ask about who the person was. Mm-hmm. What was their favorite thing to do on a Sunday? What was their favorite flavor of ice cream?
Right.
Who were they in their life?
Yeah.
What is the thing you're most proud of that they did? You know, like those questions.
How do you answer those about Jordy?
Well, the thing I'm most proud of would be his sons, my nephews, which, you know, I want to protect their journey and their privacy, but they're the greatest thing to happen to our family and the most beautiful men now and boys.
Oh, gosh.
I know, crazy. But that's 100% the thing I'm most proud of is the dad that he was. I think that would be my biggest wish. And again, like, I have such compassion because I have OCD and anxiety too. Like, I understand our brains are trying to gather information to protect us, right? So how did they die? Like, you want to know because your fear is asking that question, right? But instead, if we could try to lead with, like, is there something you'd want to share about who they were? You know, it's a great exercise in talking about who they are and were without being defined by the loss.
Yeah. No, I remember, I think I learned this from Instagram, which is a little embarrassing to say, but
We've all done it.
just even this idea of how important it is to not be trying to help people feel better in grief and sort of that moving on. And I think I definitely have a tendency to do that in all things of like, how can we make this better right now?
Yeah.
Because I don't want anyone to be upset.
Of course,
you know,
'cause,
no
like,
suffering.
Yeah, of course.
But the reality
we suffer.
But the reality being, you know,
That was a Fiddler on the Roof quote for anyone that was
if I voted
exactly. Paul and I were definitely not singing that the other day to each other as two women. But yeah, I think that, you know, it makes sense why we do all these things. But and it's just so ingrained, again, sociologically, it's so ingrained. Our society is so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here wearing a bracelet that says both, which is in honor of my friend Gavin Creel, who just passed away, who just died.
Sorry.
Yeah. And see, it's hard. And yeah, it's also hard once you realize that can really happen and it happens to you.
Yeah.
And then it happens again with like other people that you love. It's just shocking. You're just like, I thought we were like, I've hit my quota for pain.
Right.
Like, I can't do this again. And then that's not how life works, you know? And so the more that we can speak openly about how hard it is.
Comfortably in the discomfort.
So comfortably in the discomfort, and also like work together to be better about something that literally everyone is going to experience. No one is spared.
I was lucky and got to chat with Kara Swisher for
I heard. I can't wait.
I know, for the podcast. And I guess I don't want to give anything away, but she lost her dad when she was 5 and you know, just speaks similarly of how it reshapes your lens for life. So
perspective is a very difficult thing.
And so
beautiful but difficult.
My family, like, we used gallows humor a lot. I mean, and
yes, I know that about you.
Yeah, I know.
That was hard for me.
Oh, really? Why?
That's not at all my go-to place.
Oh, okay.
So I was like,
interesting.
I'm kind of, you know me, I'm kind of like secretly prude. I'm like,
right,
nervesies. Like, I'm like, sorry, continue what you were saying.
No. Well, I mean, in a way, I was gonna ask. I guess I just assume everybody uses humor in different ways, like to help through difficult things, and so I imagine your family being very funny. Maybe
my family is unbelievable. I'm the least funny person in my family by like 17 miles.
So, did you use humor with Jordy's death? No. Okay, so that's always that's really interesting.
Yeah. Again, it's very private, but I'll just leave it at like, we haven't, but then like there are so many families I know through experience camps, through my wife, through my friends, like that really do, and that really helps them. So again, it's like follow the leader. You know, I think like if someone opens that door to you, at like, you know, if you're someone that hasn't experienced grief, and that person opens that door and wants you to step in it, step in it. But if they don't open the door. You know, like I really feel
that's helpful.
It's, and sometimes we don't know what we fucking want. That's like the trickiest part. But like, you know, one day we gotta cry it out, sit next to us, rub our back, let it happen. And the next day it's like distract, be in the distraction. You know, I think like just supporting what you feel the need is, and or if they express what the need is like always the goal. But again, the trickiest bit can be like, I don't know. Like when that person doesn't know what's right. For a long time I used work to really like just plunge myself into something else. And then eventually that stopped working. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking that we would finish out our chat with a pop quiz on questions about me. I'm just kidding.
No, I was kidding. God. You know, like my straight A book smart side, I was like, I will nail this quiz.
I know.
I will win.
So something that I'm asking all my guests is, what is something that you're working on reclaiming right now?
I think I sort of answered it, but I can make it a little bit more clear. And I think it will be a forever. I think the ing is very important. I think like there will never be an ed of like it's done, reclaimed, period. But reclaiming, I think through the kids and through my work with experience camps, I think it's what grief is, like what loss is. Ugh, it's emotional. But it's like if we can help them change what it feels like to be a child that's lost someone, and for those of us that can start to change for us as adults what it can be like to lose someone, we're never going to get rid of loss, but if we can add more community and less loneliness around it, that's the goal. And I think it's something that I will always, now that I've found this work, like always be working on reclaiming for myself, and also like for my dear friends that I've made and my family and the kids, like reclaiming how our society sees grief maybe would be my answer. An emotional answer, sorry. But your podcast is emotional. I've listened to it. You go there with people. And but we could never not go there. That's just
I know.
Who we are.
And it's just, you know what? I feel so strongly. I'm so not interested in small talk.
No.
I want the real. I want the connection. It's what I'm hoping people get from the conversations is, even if they're not sitting here with us, that they feel connected.
Definitely.
So, Beanie, thank you so much for coming to do
so
this. This is so special.
Has it been like 4 hours? I don't know how long it's been. It feels like it's been no time and all the time.
I know. And love you so much.
You too.
Thank you for doing this.
Cheers.
Yeah.
You don't want to cheers with water though. It's
no.
bad.
Oh no,
it's
I'm
bad,
just
right?
Right. I know. It's bad luck.